Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. To the witnesses. Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you. 3 weeks ago, I went on a bipartisan congressional delegation trip to Turkey, Afghanistan, and the Syrian-Jordanian border, during which time I met with representatives of foreign governments, U.S. military, intelligence, and diplomatic leadership. And over the course of those conversations, I was repeatedly told of the danger posed to the United States and our allies if Turkish forces moved into northeast Syria, which was an area protected by our Kurdish partners, the Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF. When we arrived home, we realized through news alerts that, in fact, the United States, through the president's tweet, had green-lighted Turkish entry into that same area. For years now, the SDF has been our staunch allies in the fight against ISIS, losing by estimates, and I heard you quote the number as well, more than 10,000 of their own soldiers in this process. And more recently, they have been the first line of defense in maintaining the gains that we've made. At the beginning of your testimony, I heard you say that we had 3 goals in Syria. First, enduring defeat of ISIS. Second, political solution in Syria. And third, the removal of Iranian forces. Did the effort, our green-lighting or in any way, however we want to term it, the United States' stance to greenlight Turkish forces to go into Syria, does that in fact impact in a positive way the enduring defeat of ISIS?
One, the Turkish incursion into northeast Syria has not been positive for the fight against ISIS, obviously in a dozen different ways. However, we never green-lighted this, and I have to keep coming back to this point because it keeps on coming up. Nobody told, the Turks weren't waiting to get permission from us.
So then let me ask this. The removal and the announcement that we would remove U.S. forces from this area of Syria, does that help towards the goal of enduring defeat of ISIS?
If we're talking about the removal of all forces from northeast Syria, it was the considered opinion of most people in the administration that that's not going to contribute to the defeat of ISIS, enduring defeat of ISIS, and that's one reason why the President this morning essentially made an adjustment, I'm using my words carefully here, adjustment to his decision to withdraw all forces. He's going to leave some forces on.
So then the second goal, which would be the political solution in Syria, we've now created a circumstance in which our allies in the fight against ISIS, the SDF has now turned its attention towards Assad, entered into an agreement with Assad, thereby de facto entering into positive relations with Russia. Has this been helpful towards the American goals of what would be a political outcome in Syria?
It's a good question. We're looking into that. The SDF has long had relations with Russia and the Assad government. We also did not tell them they couldn't because we don't control the political future of that group or any other group inside Syria other than what we're allowed to do under the relevant UN resolution. So they were talking for a long time with them. We have to see what this agreement will actually, between the Russians and the Turks, will actually turn out on the ground.
But departing and leaving our previous allies to their own defenses, and as my colleague from Michigan said, potentially as the potential victims of genocide in northeast Syria, does that lay the groundwork for a political solution in Syria that would be in keeping with American national security interests?
Yeah. Again, we gave political guarantees to the Kurds that we would use all necessary means, all political means other than military force to try to keep the Turks out and try to keep their situation stable against Turkey. The Turks decided not to heed us, not to essentially accept our sticks and go in.
So, and have our efforts in any way been helpful towards the removal of Iranian forces from Syria?
I think our overall effort in Syria has been placing pressure on Iran in many ways, some of which I can't discuss here, but they're fairly significant. How this will have an impact on it, I don't know. But again, importantly, we're keeping our forces on in Al-Tanf in the south.
So, and my concern, I'm a former case officer with the CIA, so my perspective is of one of human intelligence. I think it's notable that as a consumer of intelligence that might be driving some of our policy, I think it should be deeply concerning to you and your colleagues that we have now lost access to human intelligence through the relationships that we did have with the Kurds. My final question is, we've now, we were withdrawing all of our troops, then we were withdrawing some of our troops. The president has now said we're going to leave some of the troops in Syria in order to keep the peace. The frenetic nature of this foreign policy objectives or strategy, I suppose one would call it, is it in any way going to serve the goals, those 1, 2, 3 goals that we stated, to remove troops, then not remove troops, and go back and forth, betray our allies in the process?
The gentlelady's time has expired, but the witness would please answer the question.
I wouldn't use the word frenetic, but a rapidly changing set of circumstances obviously poses challenges to us. We'll be able to handle them.
Certainly rapidly changing, I understand, but when we buoy back and forth, that seems a little bit more frenetic than rapidly changing. Thank you. I yield back.